HOA sealed off my grandfather's medical equipment, unaware he's the city commissioner. The perfect storm. What happens when an entitled HOA board thinks they can mess with a war veteran's life-saving medical equipment? Well, buckle up, because this story will absolutely blow your mind, and trust me, you'll want to stick around until the end, because the revenge is absolutely legendary. My name is Marcus, and this is the story of how my 78-year-old grandfather completely destroyed an entire HOA board with just one phone call. But first, let me paint you the picture of exactly how these power-hungry Karens pushed the wrong man too far. My grandfather, Thomas Mitchell, had been living peacefully in Willowbrook Estates for 15 years. This wasn't just any ordinary retirement community. We're talking about a pristine neighborhood where every lawn looked like it belonged in a magazine, and where the HOA ruled with an iron fist. Grandpa Tom was a Korean War veteran who had served his country with honor, and now in his golden years, he required several pieces of medical equipment to maintain his quality of life. We're talking about an oxygen concentrator, a CPAP machine, and a specialized wheelchair lift that we had professionally installed in his garage. The HOA's first strike, but here's where things get absolutely insane. The new HOA president, a woman named Patricia Fleming, decided that Grandpa's medical equipment was an eyesore that was somehow decreasing property values. Can you believe that life-saving medical equipment being called an eyesore? Patricia had moved into the neighborhood just 6 months earlier and immediately campaigned to become HOA president with promises to restore the community's pristine image. She had this twisted vision of perfection, where anything that didn't fit her narrow definition of beautiful had to go. The first violation notice arrived on a Tuesday morning. I remember because I was visiting Grandpa for our weekly coffee when he opened that ridiculous letter. The HOA was demanding that he relocate his oxygen concentrator from the front porch to somewhere less visible to the community. Keep in mind, his doctor had specifically recommended that the concentrator be placed near the front entrance for easy access and proper ventilation. But did Patricia care about medical necessity? Absolutely not. Grandpa, being the reasonable man he always was, tried to explain the medical requirements to the HOA board. He even brought a letter from his physician explaining why the equipment needed to be positioned exactly where it was. But Patricia and her cronies weren't having any of it. They claimed that medical equipment didn't qualify for any exemptions under their community guidelines, which, by the way, is completely illegal under both state and federal disability laws. The escalation begins when Grandpa refused to move his life-saving equipment. The harassment campaign began in earnest. The HOA started issuing daily violation notices, each one more ridiculous than the last. They complained about his wheelchair ramp being too visible from the street. They cited him for his medical oxygen delivery truck making weekly visits. They even had the audacity to claim that his specialized medical waste disposal violated their community aesthetics standards. But here's where Patricia made her biggest mistake. She decided to take matters into her own hands and called the city building inspector, claiming that Grandpa was running an illegal medical facility out of his home. She was absolutely convinced that she could use city bureaucracy to force him into compliance. The building inspector, who was actually a decent guy named Mike, came out and immediately saw through Patricia's nonsense. Mike took one look at the properly installed, doctor-prescribed equipment and told Patricia that there were no violations whatsoever. This rejection only fueled Patricia's obsession. She started showing up at Grandpa's house unannounced, taking pictures of his equipment, and even measuring the exact positioning of his oxygen concentrator with a tape measure. The woman had completely lost her mind with power, and she was dragging the entire HOA board along with her ridiculous crusade. The nuclear option then came the day that changed everything. I'll never forget getting that phone call from Grandpa, and his voice was shakier than I'd ever heard it. Patricia had convinced the HOA board to hire a private security company to enforce community standards. These rent-a-cops had shown up at Grandpa's house with official-looking paperwork and had actually sealed off access to his medical equipment with yellow tape, claiming it was a community safety hazard. Let me be crystal clear about what happened here. They literally prevented a 78-year-old war veteran from accessing his oxygen concentrator and CPAP machine. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was a direct threat to his life. Grandpa had to call 911 because he was having difficulty breathing without his equipment, and the paramedics had to cut through the HOA's yellow tape to save his life. The ambulance, the fire department, the police, they all showed up at Grandpa's house that day because Patricia's power trip had become a medical emergency. The paramedics were absolutely furious when they realized what had happened. One of them, a guy named Rodriguez, told me later that he'd never seen such a blatant disregard for human life disguised as community management. The truth revealed, but here's what Patricia and her entire HOA board didn't know. And this is where the story gets absolutely beautiful. My grandfather wasn't just any ordinary resident of Willowbrook Estates. Thomas Mitchell was actually Thomas Mitchell, the city commissioner of public works for our entire metropolitan area. He had been serving in city government for over 20 years, but he kept his professional and personal life completely separate. Most of his neighbors had no idea that this quiet, humble war veteran was actually one of the most powerful men in city government. Grandpa had always believed in keeping a low profile. He never used his position for personal gain, never name-dropped his title, and never pulled strings for his own benefit. But when Patricia's HOA literally threatened his life by cutting off access to his medical equipment, all bets were off. The morning after the ambulance incident, Grandpa made a single phone call to the city attorney's office. Within 3 hours, Patricia received a hand-delivered cease and desist order signed by the mayor himself. The order didn't just tell the HOA to back off. It launched a full investigation into their practices and their legal authority to interfere with medical equipment. The beautiful destruction. What happened next was absolutely legendary. The city's legal department discovered that Patricia's HOA had been operating without proper municipal oversight for over 2 years. Their community guidelines weren't just medically discriminatory, they were completely illegal under city zoning laws. The private security company they hired didn't have the proper licenses to operate in residential areas. And here's the kicker. Their entire community management contract was invalid because they had never filed the required paperwork with the city. Patricia's power trip had exposed the fact that her entire HOA was essentially an illegal organization. The city attorney's office didn't just shut them down. They filed criminal charges for elderly endangerment, harassment, and operating without proper municipal authority. Patricia personally faced charges for interfering with emergency medical equipment, which in our state is a felony. But Grandpa wasn't done yet. He used his connections in city government to ensure that every single property owner in Willowbrook estates received a full refund of every HOA fee they had paid over the past 2 years. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars returned to families who had been illegally charged by an organization that had no legal right to exist. The perfect ending, the best part. Patricia had to sell her house and move out of the neighborhood because she couldn't afford the legal fees and fines. The other HOA board members publicly apologized to Grandpa and begged him not to press additional charges. The private security company lost their business license and had to pay massive fines to the state and Grandpa. He's still living peacefully in Willowbrook Estates with his medical equipment exactly where it needs to be, helping him live his best life. The neighborhood is actually better now without the toxic HOA, constantly harassing residents over petty nonsense. If this story taught me anything, it's that you should never judge a book by its cover, and you definitely shouldn't mess with someone's medical equipment. Patricia thought she was dealing with just another elderly resident she could push around, but she had actually declared war on one of the most connected men in city government. If you enjoyed this story of ultimate HOA karma, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more incredible tales of entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Trust me, we've got plenty more stories that will absolutely blow your mind, and you won't want to miss a single one.